Well, as you can see, she's back. Good morning. It is sunrise.
Good morning. It's good to be back.
Yes.
I'm sure it is.
Yes, it is good to be back. Which you bring come?
I bring myself.
You are not enough. You are not enough.
I'm sure those at home will tell you that I am enough. I am
Is
back.
that cake for me? Okay, I have my own. Good to have you back.
It sure is good to be back.
Well, she's Aloredu. I'm Ayo Makinde, and we say good morning. By the way, how was the trip to the office today?
Oh, that.
Yes, that.
No, first of all, when I arrived, I was pleasantly surprised. I drove past Oshodi and I thought, what's going on? Where's everybody? Then I got to Third Mainland Bridge. It's 11 o'clock in the morning and there's no traffic on Third Mainland. What's going on?
Lagos, Nigeria?
What's going on? And then this morning, coming to work, well, the road is not completed yet, but, I had a smooth ride.
Good. That's just to tell you that, maybe you should go away more often. So
that things happened in my absence.
But.
Okay, there's a but.
I have to call out the Lagos State government on this. And it's not just the Lagos State government. I'm pretty sure it happens, in various parts of the country as well. And if you have any such experience, please share. What do I mean? I asked you about the Berger bus stop.
Yeah.
You say you didn't notice anything because you were busy. Someone else was driving, thankfully. But the challenge for me is time. In fact, on my way to work this morning, very early this morning, the bus stop already had 2 lanes on the expressway. 2 lanes.
You mean the buses were using 2 lanes
on the major highway
bus stop.
As bus stop, right there in the middle of the road. So I'm very pleasantly surprised that you said Oshodi was a fly through.
Oh yeah.
Third Mainland was a fly through, which, by the way, we understand might be closed, soon for whatever reason.
Where?
Don't calm down.
Where will be closed, please?
So, but because the Minister of Works, took a tour of the underpass and the overpass of the Lagos or the Third Mainland Bridge and said maybe there will be a need to pay some attention to certain sections of the Third Mainland Bridge. But that's not the story. The story is that buses still use major highways as parks.
Even those that have service lanes.
Exactly. And guess what? To make it worse, the bus stops were free. The proper bus stops had empty spaces.
They don't want to use the bus stop because it means veering off the main road for just a minute, which is too much time.
You see, this thing that we say about rule of law is because there is no consequence for breaking the law. If there was a consequence, and the thing happens also along the major highway on the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, the Mowe, Bafo, and the rest of them, the same thing happens. People will just stay in the middle of the road, all in the name of picking up passengers and dropping passengers. And no one is calling anyone out. Look, I don't know how importantly we take the Nigerian project, because every little action is speaking to that. Forget whether or not people, are educated about these things or not. We all know what is right. Why stand in the middle of the highway? Some of these governors we're talking about, went to Rwanda and to Kigali, to be precise. And they saw that, I doubt if they saw buses parking on the major highways in Kigali.
No, you will not see buses parking on them, because I've been to Kigali. You will not see the buses in the middle of the road.
So now that they're back from Kigali, I expect them to enforce those things as well.
This is Nigeria. Nigeria is a different country.
Now that's where the problem is.
That's why you're talking about coups in places that we're not even thinking about that in Nigeria. Because Nigeria is different.
Oh, really?
Yes.
What makes Nigeria different? I asked, by the way, there's another AI now separate from ChatGPT. It's called perplexity.ai. So I asked Perplexity, said, why are there no coups in the US? He said, well, the military in the US have a long-standing civilian, adherence to civilian authorities. that they are used to obeying civilian authorities. This Perplexity AI now also said, however, the US,
there is a however.
The US has been involved in coups in other parts of the world.
Yes. I can't remember who said it yesterday, that you will notice that all these coups, that people have fingers in them.
I didn't say what I'm saying, and no one told me. It's Perplexity AI.
Perplexity, yes. And if you look at it critically, you will see that it is true.
I don't even want to look at it critically. I just want to look at it.
Look at Niger, for instance. Everybody's interested in Niger.
No, the reason is, okay, well, yeah.
There's something that they want.
And Nigeria doesn't have it. I think it really depends on the people.
Nigeria has some, but don't forget, most of these countries are countries that have a long history of dictatorships. Nigeria has, at least since 1999, we've had a good democratic system. We've had, you can't stay more than 4 years, and you can't stay more than 2 terms, and we have adhered to it. So no family has held us to ransom for 30 years, and 40 years.
Exactly, and I think, it's also helpful that the military decided that they're going to live by the tenets of democracy. I'm just hoping that in the middle of all of these melee things that are happening all over the country, in particular, difficult decisions that should have been taken 20, 30 years ago that we are now taking, is already pushing so many.
That are affecting us the way they are.
I'm telling you.
I mean, the poverty level now is just unthinkable. There are no cars on the roads because people can't afford to buy fuel. And I keep wondering, what are people eating?
By the way...
Because the food inflation is so high.
By the way, someone said that there's a new offense that you can be held for in Lagos now.
Which is?
After checking all your papers, everything is right.
Oh, for having a full tank?
Once you have a full tank, it's an offense. You can get arrested for that one. I'm not even in that department at all. So...
Now, NLC is planning another warning strike.
Well...
Tuesday and Wednesday.
It's a warning strike.
Yeah. In fact, I heard Joe Ajero telling Sheung yesterday that, in fact, channels 2 should shut down and be part of the strike. Of course, Sheung says, so who's going to tell everybody else what's going on?
Sometimes some of these things, for me, Alero, the challenge is just one. Speak to Nigerians. Speak to the people. Okay. NLC is talking about a 2-day warning strike now because of all these issues that are happening, and they are calling out at the federal level because it is the federal government that is taking these initiatives. However, one, the federal government says the subsidy money is being saved up. Question is, where is it being saved?
Where is it and what is it being used for?
What is it being used for at this point? Number two, federal government said they're giving 5 billion naira in loans and grants to state governments. Some of them said they have received.
They have received.
Please,
up to 2 billion.
Can we have some kind of report as to what this 2 billion that the state governments have received doing for the indigenes in the states? Maybe then people can begin, because for me, the whole thing is about communication. You don't communicate with people, you are asking for trouble.
Communicate and then accountability. Federal government says they've given you 2 billion. Okay, fine. So what have you done with the 2 billion?
Or what will you do with it?
Okay, there's 3 more billion to come. What do you plan to do with it? Tell the people. It's for the benefit of the people. We are the ones you're going to do these things to and for. Let us know what those things are that you want to do for us.
Exactly.
Is that asking for too much?
Well, I don't know. Because, okay, one state government, I'm not sure, I think it was it Kwara State, they said that they have received truckloads of rice.
Yeah, I think I heard Governor Hope talking about Hope Uzodinma talking about that yesterday.
Okay. Yeah. So some have received. So question is, you talked about accountability. And I think that is where the whole thing is about. Communicate with people. Let there be. We signed up for open government, right?
And there's FOI.
Why is it still closed?
There's FOI.
Okay.
But they won't even give us information.
No, then we're going to have to call them out all the time.
They say we're nosy journalists.
Well, we are. That's our job, and it's embedded in the Constitution.
In fact, the bigger the nose, the better.
That's why this morning we're going to be beginning the conversation with the leadership Nigeria needs.
There you go.
That's the first thing we're going to be discussing today.
And then from there, we'll turn our focus on Africa Climate Summit. What's that about? You know this thing about zero emissions. I keep thinking about it. Anyway, we'll have time to talk about it in the course of the program.
Yeah. E-waste cleanup and management. You'll be wondering what that is about. It's not just waste, it's e-waste. What does it mean?
And then we'll be talking about stemming suicide. Have you noticed that poverty is driving a lot of people to have all those funny thoughts about taking their own lives?
And one other thing that a psychologist told me, which we'll be getting into, we criminalize suicide or attempted suicide. Meanwhile, is it a criminal offense or a mental health issue? We'll look at that later on this morning. And our artist of the week is a human being.
Oh. Thankfully, it is not a dog.
Nah. So, grab your cup of cocoa.
Or cocoa.
I don't know why it sounds funny to me when you say that. I will be right back to begin the show. Stay with us.
Sorry about that. Thank you for joining us. Now let's get the show started. There are many challenges facing Nigeria, including economic stress, insecurity, corruption, poverty, and the list goes on and on. But one of our biggest problems is leadership and its lack of accountability. Just what we were talking about as we were opening the program this morning. Tell us what is going on and make sure that you, as a leader, are accountable. Leaders are often not held accountable for their actions, which leads to corruption and impunity. Some African countries, even our next-door neighbors, have witnessed a military takeover. Some others, like Rwanda, are shaking up the military hierarchy. Rwanda and Cameroon are doing such. But many will argue that democracy is still the best form of government, even with its attendant problems. And the problems are many. Labour has just declared a warning strike action starting from Tuesday. The question is, when can we or when will we ever get it right? And more importantly, how can we get the right leadership which will lead the country to where we desire it to be? That's what our talking point will be this morning, and it's my pleasure to welcome Professor Ademola Abbas, Professor of International Law and Global Security. Good morning. Okay, joining us from our studio in Abuja, I'd like to welcome a legal practitioner, Mr. Obioma Eze-Nwobodo. Good morning, and thank you for joining us.
Good morning, thank you.
Yes, so joining us later in the program, of course, we have Salihu Tanko Yakasai, 2003 PRP governorship candidate. He will also be joining us virtually, as well as Professor Abbas. But in the meantime, we have Mr. Eze-Nwobodo. So let us open the discussion with you, sir. Coups are happening, especially in Francophone Africa. We haven't had any in Anglophone Africa yet. And some are saying that it is getting closer to Nigeria. And the main thing that people are talking about that is causing these coups is the quality of the leadership in these countries. Let's bring all that talk to our own country, Nigeria. As far as leadership is concerned, how do you think we're doing? How is our democracy doing?
Mr. Eze-Nwobodo, that's for you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. To me, as a citizen, I would say yes, we are doing right. And I will also say that we are not getting it also right. Yes, we are in democracy. We have maintained the 4-year tenure, as you people earlier said. We have been having democratically elected leaders. But if we can be fair to ourselves, the dividend of democracy is not being allowed to get down to the common man, to the masses. As we are talking, we are in the subsidy removal era, where subsidy was suddenly removed from petroleum. And these palliatives that the citizens have been waiting for hasn't happened. In fact, what is happening now is a mockery, despite the 5 billion loan grant that was given to state governments. You mentioned about some state government ordering bags of rice and what have you. For goodness sake, that's not leadership. Subsidy is meant to help the people to come out of poverty, to make their standard of living to be higher. We are the poverty capital of the world. If you are talking about a palliative, the palliative that you get from the removal of subsidy should reflect on people's life. Let me dovetail to Abuja here, where I reside, and where by the grace of God, I'm the chairman of MBA Gariki, branch of MBA. Have we had anything like palliative? We haven't. In fact, the minister of FCT that just came in and started threatening the citizens, the residents, without asking or feeling the pulse of the people or understanding what needs to be done in FCT. If you come into leadership, first of all, you should take time to study, understudy your environment before going public to issue any policy statement. I have been in Abuja, and I'm a stakeholder here, and I'm telling you that the resident, that issue of demolition or whatever, is not their problem. We have some important issues to be addressed. If you are talking about subsidy and you want to bring on palliatives, you should be talking about providing effective means of transportation, which is lacking in this city. And that is why you see people coming into the town to find a way to reside.
Mr. Obodo, don't you think, just 1 second, it's a question of leadership, not just for one section, but for the entirety of the nation. And I'm glad that you're raising some of these issues already. But perhaps to also raise whether or not you think there are difficult decisions that should have been taken that weren't being taken, or that there were some systems that have been compromised that need to be reset. Someone said that, we're taking difficult decisions now that we should have taken 20 years ago. So the question then is, does it have to take us up to 20 years to take the difficult decisions and make the difficult moves that we need to make lives better for people 20 years, 30 years after?
Yes, difficult decision, it depends on your own definition of what you mean by difficult decisions. Because when you are talking about difficult decisions, to me, like what we are talking about, is the government doing what it's supposed to do. You are talking about petroleum and what have you, and good leadership. Why are we not refining? It is the decision, it is the action of the government that makes us not to be refining, not you, not me. The difficult task is for them to do what is right.
It also makes me ask the question.
To where I reside.
Yeah, we'll come back there. But it also makes me wonder, Mr. Zinwobodo. So Nigeria is not refining now. And yes, it is only natural to put it at the doorstep of Nigeria, of the federal government. But the people who are supposed to be working at the refineries are not imported into the country. They are also Nigerians. So How come we got this bad in the area of refining or not refining petroleum products, and no one has said anything? But let me ask Professor Ademola Abbas the same question that Alero asked, at the beginning. Do you think we are taking the right steps, difficult or not, in making our nation better to avert any kind of crisis in the near or far future?
In the name of a coup.
Well, thank you very much. I think that's a very important question, and I think we have addressed this once or twice in the past. Look, there is no better way of saying this, and we cannot deodorize it. I'm happy you did mention the fact that what the current government is doing is something we should have been doing probably in the last 500 years, to be honest with you. No country in the world can be using 90% of its GDP to service debt and then hope to survive for a long, long time. I think what is going on is we have got used to certain comfort in Nigeria, which the current administration is trying probably to say, look, we've been enjoying this for a long time, yes. Our fuel has been subsidized for a long time. This has taken place for a long time. Now let's start rolling back. Because if you don't roll back, the consequences are going to be much, much dire. Not only for us, on our children and our children's children. But you have to
I'm sorry. You said we got used to comfort. Who doesn't want to get used to comfort? Who doesn't want to get used to comfort?
Hey, we got used to comfort, but that comfort is a comfort we have bought in a very cheap way. It's a comfort we have bought by getting ourselves into a lot of debt. That's what I'm saying about. We keep on taking loans and loans and loans and loans, and then we are using 90% of our income, of our GDP, to service debts to other countries that we have procured debt from. Now, that is the problem, and we got used to that particular system. And that is why every successive government that tried to remove subsidy was forced to a standstill, the last being President Jonathan. Now, no country can survive that for much longer. When you look at the policies the current government is putting in place, and I'll come back to the fact that the impact of that in Nigeria, and obviously in the short term, they are policies that in the long term are going to benefit Nigerians. This country is going to emerge. I am confident about it. It's going to emerge from all these policies much greater. Of course, there are certain conditionalities that must be in place, and that is very important, because one of the tragedies of African democratic system is the lack of continuity. As an example, you have a government coming and saying, look, this subsidy is item, we let it go. This item, we did away with it and stuff like that. Another one comes and rolls back and says, you know what, I don't believe in that. So the gains of 4 years will be wasted, or the gains of 8 years will be wasted. So one of the conditionalities is that whatever you are doing now, we can see the beauty of what is going on. We can see the long-term consequences of this on Nigerian economy, on Nigerians themselves. Let's make sure that we build institutions that will solidify the gains and make sure that whatever happens in the future, we don't go back to where we were coming from. That's what I'm talking about. So we got used to this, and whether you like it or not, one of the most cruel things to deal with in this world is to change the people's culture. Nigerians, we got used to buying fuel, and quite rightly so. We got used to buying our petrol at very cheap price compared to other countries in the world. And you can't blame us. We have oil for free, and it was mismanaged, no doubt. Money was stolen, money was looted, a lot of corruption, lack of transparency. So Nigerians are saying, look, the only thing we benefit from our oil is to have a subsidized oil. So if you're going to take it from us, and remember in one of the sessions I had with you in the studio there, I think just the same day, President Ashiwaju made a statement on June 12th. And one of the questions you asked was that where he was asking Nigerians again to sacrifice. And I said yes, but the president was asking Nigerians then to sacrifice, but in asking Nigerians to sacrifice more, he put certain conditions on the table. He said, look, I am asking you to sacrifice, and because of that, my government will do ABC. That is a contract. President Ashiwaju has entered into a contract with Nigerian people that sacrifice more. I understand your sacrifices, but these sacrifices we are going to make for our government to be able to work, for us to go on the right path. This and this and this are the benefits. And this and this and this are what the government will do on its own part. So make sure that the sacrifices you are making on the one hand are not wasted on the part of, for instance, bloated governance on the other hand. So if you're asking Nigerians to make certain sacrifices, as an example, tighten your security system, tighten your budget and this and that, the government cannot be asking Nigerians to do that on the one hand. And on the other hand, the government is having a bloated system. That is when people are going to say, hello, It doesn't make any sense at all. So the long and short is that, yes, what we are doing now is the right thing to do. It's what we should have been doing 500 years ago. But the most important thing is not just doing it, it's making sure that the government puts structures and institutions in place to make sure that whatever happens tomorrow, whatever happens after 8 years, will not be wasted when another government comes in. I think for me, that is the most critical point.
Okay, but Prof, you say that we're going in the right direction, but people are going to be asking for more accountability. This issue of subsidy, for instance, we're told that we saved 400 billion in the first month or so, something like that kind of figure. But we haven't been told where it has gone. What has it been used for? Shouldn't there be a plan? Okay, this is how much we have been spending on subsidy, so we're going to save XYZ amount every month, and this is how we're going to deploy the funds that we intend to save. Prof?
Hello.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes.
Yeah, that is one of the conditionalities I referred to in my earlier statement, that it's not enough to say we are on the right path. The government must make sure that it puts conditionalities on ground. And as I said, one of them, I talk about the lean government. Another one is, of course, I've mentioned transparency. You cannot be asking people to make sacrifices and not show them that you've been transparent in managing the outcomes or the dividends of their sacrifices. However, having said that, the process of government is different from the process that we adopt in our individual homes and corners. A government is a different entity, maybe because I've been involved in it. If people expect a government to come on day-to-day level, every single day, okay, Monday we save 200 naira, so I come and announce it on Tuesday, Wednesday we save 400 naira, it doesn't even work like that. There is transparency, but people also, we have to be patient. I understand the Nigerians have become impatient, and quite rightly so, because we have trusted our governments too far for too long. So you can't really blame Nigerians for being a little impatient with their governments nowadays, because it's a question of you take your eyes off the ball, then a lot of nonsenses begin to happen. We don't want to tolerate that. We don't want to accept that in Nigeria anymore. I accept that. However, we must also understand that a government has a business to run. And I must say, it's a credit to President Tinubu so far, his government, that at least they feed us information constantly. I think the government presidents have spoken about 4-5 times in the last 100 days, which is commendable, whether we like it or not. But then the government has a business to run. Whatever they save, whatever have been consequences or dividends of all the savings that they've made in the short term, they should find time to come and explain to Nigerians how much they have saved, and more importantly, what are those savings going to be channeled to? Nigerians want to know. But what I'm saying is that in our desire to know, we must also understand that a government cannot be turned into something like a parrot, that every single second you have to come on television and come and say this and that. Because at the end of the day, don't forget, whatever you say also will have consequences. So you must make sure that what you are saying is not, you are not saying today, oh, we've saved 700 billion naira. Meanwhile, the very next day you spend 300 billion of that particular money to service part of our another distance, and then come back again, and you open yourself to a lot of inconsistencies. So the message is, yes, government needs to be more transparent. It's high time.
Session here, Prof. My apologies. Is maybe people need to get that parity kind of impression for now from a government that communicates, because we haven't had that kind of situation for a long time. But let me come back to you, Mr. Ezenwobodo. And you've also listened to Prof and everything. Perception, many people say, is reality. Whatever people perceive is their reality, irrespective of whatever good intentions there are. Now, generally, when we talk about Nigeria, talk about development, talk about all these things, we're talking about the federal government. But then we have states. We have every single one of them responsible and supposedly accountable to their people. So, and this is where dissatisfaction, discomfort, and all those things actually do happen. The policies of the federal government, no doubt, has impact on the citizens directly. But the indigents in each state also need to feel, the impact of their government at various levels. How well would you say we are doing at that subnational level in terms of ensuring that people get the right kind of governance that will make them feel like they're being led right?
Yeah, thank you so much. I think we are hitting the nail on the head. You can't talk about responsive governance without talking about grassroots governance. And in Nigeria, in most states of the Federation, we don't have local government system, democratically elected local government system in place. Many state governments have usurped the powers of the local government chairman. Many state governments have refused to conduct a local government election. And we can't be talking about getting it right, having the kind of leadership we want, without looking at this issue, because it's not just about the president, it's not just about the federal government. It not happen at the state level, it not happen at the local government level. And if we get it correctly at the state, if the state can allow the local government to work, and if the local government work because they have that direct relationship with the people, because the local man in one community or one hamlet doesn't know about the federal government. The government he knows is the one he sees and feels, and that's the local government. So it's so saddening that in many states of the Federation, we don't have the local government system in operation.
But let me ask you something on that one, Mr. Zeobodo. My apologies, my sincere apologies. Just a second. On that, I've asked this question in 2 conversations yesterday, including from a governor, which is, do we have a constitutionally guaranteed, and I know Prof. may also want to weigh in on that, do we have a constitutionally guaranteed 3rd tier of government, i.e. a local government system, constitutionally guaranteed? Do we have a local government system constitutionally guaranteed as a 3rd tier of government, as opposed to being just an administrative office for the state government?
Yeah, that's a legal question, and this legal question, it has been answered even by the Supreme Court, guaranteeing the terms of offices of local government chairmen. We have the local government in the Constitution, created by the Constitution. You can't just wake up and create a local government. It's a constitutional issue. We have their functions allocated to them, and the Constitution has said that nobody shall take over any system of government by force. So when a state governor takes over the functions of the local government, it is taking it by force. We have 3 tiers of government, and we have the federal government, we have the state, and we have the local government. So anybody that is telling you that we don't have the local government system in place, or that it is an appendage of the state, is just trying to be clever by half. Whether we like it or not, I think the next focus should be on the local government system, it's being effective. Because let me tell you, if we have an effective system of local government, I'm telling you that many of the issues we are having, even insecurity, will be reduced, because it boils from the locality. Some of these things are organic, and it is the local government system at that level that will detect it first and find a way to nip it at the bud. But because we don't have it, before you know what is happening, the whole thing has engulfed the state, and they will be calling the federal government to look into it or to come and address it. The local government system is a constitutional issue, and it has been guaranteed both by the Constitution, and the Supreme Court has enforced it, has pronounced on it, has guaranteed their tenure, and it's saddening that the state governors are still seeing it as an appendage of their offices. So, and also when we talk about the local government, we should also...
Mr. Zeobodo, please, if you say it the way you have just said it, how come nobody has taken it upon themselves to take the state government to court?
But many of the issues have gone to court. Many of the issues have gone to court. You can remember in the last administration, many of the issues have gone to court, even up to the Supreme Court. And Supreme Court, they have been so affirmative in confirming the constitutionality of the local government system we have in Nigeria, and their rights or powers to guide their funds and to appropriate their funds. You can remember in the last administration of Muhammad Buhari, the AGF of the Federation, the AGF of the Federation then at a point wanted to stop a kind of a dispensing local government fund to state government that do not have a constitutionally elected local government system. Some persons challenged it, but his action then on the pronouncement of the court. And I believe him. If a state governor has refused to conduct a local government election, he has no right to appropriate the funding meant for that local government, because it's supposed to be appropriated by an elected local government chairman, not by an appointed chairman appointed by the governor who belongs to his political party or a friend of the governor. So when we are talking about, we should know that governance is local, as they always say. Okay. It is local. When you address the local issue, and that local issue can only be addressed by the local government chairman, then you have some of these issues would have been solved.
Okay, well, Mr. Ezenwobodo, just a quick one, because we have another guest joining us shortly, but let me quickly ask Prof this same question, and if you can take it in 30 seconds or 60 before we go back to our third guest, which is, do we have a constitutionally guaranteed third tier of government in the local government system? If we do, as you agree with Mr. Ezenwobodo, how come it seems like state governments just willy-nilly roughshod on the local government systems without much adherence to what you may believe is both the pronouncement of the Constitution and the pronouncement of the Supreme Court? Professor Abbas, that's for you.
Well, thank you very much, Ayo. I think the gentleman also answered that question. Look, if you look at the Nigerian Constitution, precisely Chapter 1, Part 2, look at Section 7 of the Nigerian Constitution, 1999, as revised. It lays out clearly the existence of local government administration, the third tier, so-called third tier administration in the Nigerian political space. And it says, I think in Section 7, that the state shall take necessary actions to make sure that the local government is there. It's written in the Constitution, loud and clear, Chapter 1, Part 2, Section 7. The only limiting factor is on Section 8 of the Nigerian Constitution concerning the creation of new state, and so on and so forth. So there is no question about the legal footing of the existence of local government as a tier of political administration in Nigeria. So that answers the first part of your question. The second part is then why, as local government administration existed in the way it has existed. Look, Ayo, that question is interesting, because you could also ask why has the state government administration existed vis-a-vis the federal government the way it has existed. We are in a country in which the federal government, that is the central government, sees other tiers of government as slaves and not equal partners. There's something fundamentally wrong with the way we administer. We copy federalism or presidential system of government from America without copying and without learning how they were able to birth it. That is the problem we are facing in the country. States in Nigeria see themselves as slaves or appendages of the federal government. You have states that go to the federal government every single month, cap in hand, to go and beg for subvention. Subvention from the money, from the resources you generate from your own state, and you give the federal government. I don't know whether you understand it. I am the landlord in my house. I work, I make money. I give that money to my housemaid or house help, and then go back to that house help every month to come and give me money to be able to run the budget of the house. It simply doesn't work. What it does is that it will thwart the arrangement. The central government has no business administering the finances made by state in Nigeria. I'm beginning from that before I go to the government. In the days of regions generated their own fund, and decide to allocate part of it to the central government. That is how it should be in the federal system. Yeah. Go to US. It's not that the federal system, federal government doesn't generate its own money at the end of the day. So it doesn't sit over state government and tell them, boys, bring the money to me. They bring money every single, all the states in the 36 states in the Nigerian Federal Capital Territory. Bring money to the federal government, which then sits on top of them, and then say, okay, every month we take this billion, we take that billion. When that happens, you weaken your state government administration and you make them appendages. And that is why you don't have state government versus federal government in Nigeria. We just saw when former chairman of president of the governor of CBN made all these, incredibly unfriendly policies just before the elections. We had 3 states, including Kogi and Kaduna and other states, taking the federal government of Nigeria, Buhari, to court that you couldn't do this in this system. That was an aberration. It doesn't normally happen every day like that. But that was also very gladdening that you have some states that have become bold and said, you know what, we can't operate like this. So the same thing with Blue. I don't need to mention them. I'm sure you will have seen a video that went viral 3 days ago, in which some local government chairmen in this country, in a state in this country, to be precise, in Ogun State, where I'm speaking from, went and prostrated to the governor of the state. These are local government chairmen prostrating to the governor of a state. So what do you expect? Don't get me wrong. I am not saying if local government chairmen have done something wrong, they should not, constitutionally, that is what they should not. I'm not saying they should not constitutionally appease the state or mend fences with the state. But that is different from when you go like schoolboys and prostrating to the principal and saying, oh, this and that. And I mean, I saw that. I was mortified. I was horrified. I was horrified because I'm not horrified because they just proceed to the governor, but because they are reducing their constitutional importance to absolute nothing.
Yeah.
You can't proceed to the governor today and then tomorrow and then say, I want to take the same government to court. It doesn't even work like that.
Yeah.
So constitutionally, local government administration exists in Nigeria, but politically, they've rendered themselves completely, I'm sorry to say, useless because of political patronage and this and that. But in the same way, states have done that vis-a-vis the federal government in Nigeria.
Okay. Joining us now is Salihu Tanko Yakasai, who was the PRP governorship candidate in the recently concluded elections. Thank you. Good morning, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, I am happy that you're joining us at this time, because the question I'm going to ask you now, I assume that you're going to give an answer arising from your experience, because it's about the process through which leaders emerge in Nigeria, our electioneering process. What are your thoughts? I mean, our speakers have said, yes, we're going in the right direction, which means that maybe we are now beginning to select the kind of leaders who will take us to the utopia. But is the system through which these leaders emerge, is that system one that is acceptable? Is it free? Is it fair?
Well, thank you so much for that question. And I think that is exactly as you just were speaking. These were exactly the issues that were running through my head, because you have to go back to how these leaders, and the number one process is the number one platform or institution is the political parties. These are the vehicles, with which these leaders stand for election and win election and then assume office. So that's the first institution. Apart from the political parties, I'll come back to the political parties. But apart from the political parties, we also have the other institutions that produce leaders. Even before you grow up, before you want to lead any position in the society, you have the home. The family unit is an institution that have broken homes in our societies now, and so on and so forth. I'll elaborate on that later on. You also have to look at the institutions, like, for instance, the school system, that produce leaders. All these three examples that I've given, need total revamping. For instance, if I should go back to the political process, we have political parties that are conducting primaries in terms of not even knowing the number of members that they have, because I don't think there's any political party that is fully digitalized in terms of the membership of their members. There is just a record in the level. It's not something that is being handled very well. You also have the political parties that are not abiding by the Electoral Act. Electoral guidelines, that entails that you have to, do your primaries according to some certain rules and guidelines, but we have seen them flaunting these guidelines and so on and so forth. And I believe that if we want to strengthen the process, we have to go back to this at least three or other processes that produce leaders in Nigeria so that we can have quality leaders. There are some qualities that you are expected to have in a leader. You have to have competence. You have to have ability to communicate effectively. You have to have character.
Mr. Tanko Yakasa, if you can hear me, perhaps the challenge with that really is the people that we are talking to about leadership. Most of the people who vote are not as educated. They're not so educated. I mean, look at the political rallies and all. How many of them really are going to ask the question, what are the qualities of this particular leader that wants to be a councillor or a chairman of a local government or a member of the House of Assembly and all of those things? So it goes back to the question that Alero asked, just now about the selection process. So what needs to happen if the people who vote, a good number of the people who vote are not so educated about why they are selecting who, but a little number here and there, and then they are good to go?
I do agree in that the vast majority of the electorates are not whether maybe educated or enlightened enough to know the choices that they are making, especially with the economic situation. If you are economically deprived, to a certain limit, you've lost your freedom, to choose what you want and who you want. I do agree that, but it's a question of is bottom-up approach or top-to-bottom approach. And I think for me, it's both ways. While we are asking the leaders to do what is right, we should also be asking the citizens, or to also live up to their expectation. We have a number of people, that are enlightened, educated in the society, civil society groups, journalists, and so on and so forth. These are people that can continue to enlighten the people to know that the type of leaders that you elect have direct consequences on your future, more or less. You understand? So it will take time, but what I always advocate is for us to start with ourselves. You understand? How many of us have our documents intact, maybe car registration documents intact? How many of us, stamp our feet and say we are not going to give bribe for anybody that demands bribe? These are the kind of things that we should be inculcating in ourselves so that at least it starts with you. Like they always say, change begins with you. So this is one of the things that I always advocate, but we have to continue the enlightenment so that the general public, the masses, those that have the number in terms of voting, to do that. And the significant percentage of Nigerian population now, almost about 70%, are young people, and these young people now, you have quite a number of them that are educated and aware and enlightened. How many of them have smartphones that are always being updated on the happenings in the world? These are people that we should be targeting in terms of awareness creating. These are the bulk of the voters as we have them today. So there should be a coordinated effort in enlightening the general public of the consequences. You have collected 200 naira, 100 naira, 500 naira to vote for a candidate that is not qualified. If the consequences come and the negative effect of that action starts to build, this is the time that we should be telling people, okay, you see now that you are suffering from so and so, it's as a result of that 500 naira that you collected and voted for someone. I contested an election. I've gone to the 44 local governments of Kano twice in my campaign election in the last election, 2023 election. So we know all these things. We have seen it, and we know that it's a long way to go. But I think it's a collective effort. It's a collective effort. There has to be a deliberate effort by Nigerians collectively to say that we want better leadership.
Okay.
Understand? Or else it will continue to deteriorate.
Okay.
I'm saddened that the quality of leadership in Nigeria keeps falling. And nobody is doing anything about it.
Oh dear. Well, we must start winding down now. And what we're looking at actually is the leadership that Nigeria needs. So let us try and paint a picture of what Nigeria should be looking for in its leadership now. Because there are leaders for certain periods in the lives of nations. So what is the kind of leadership? I will begin with you, Mr. Ezenwobodo. What kind of leadership do you think Nigeria requires at this point in time in the history of its life?
Thank you. To me, let me start from the executive. What Nigerians need from the executive is an executive that is responsible and responsive, an executive that understands the feelings of the people, an executive that works for the people. And as Prof has said, an executive that should sacrifice first. I mean, there's no reason why we should have a bloated government. There's no reason why we should have more ministers. We need an executive that should cut down the cost of governance. Also, on the judiciary, we need a judiciary that should be strong, a judiciary that should be well enlightened, a judiciary that should be able to give a fair and firm decisions that agree with the people. That's why I agree with that maxim that all eyes should be on the judiciary. And all eyes also should be on the legislature. We need a legislature that can pass the right laws, a legislature that will do its oversight function and make sure that policies of government are implemented appropriately. A legislature that thinks about the people, not about themselves, not about the cars they will buy, not about their accommodation, but for the interest and the goods of the people of Nigeria.
Okay, we don't have time. I'd be asking you, how can the electorate identify all these in the leadership? But we don't have time for you to answer all that. Professor Abbas, the kind of leadership that Nigeria needs at this point in time.
Well, thank you. I don't think there is any point in rehashing, what the gentleman just said. I think he captured most of them, to be honest with you. What we lack in Nigeria today, basically, whether you are executive, legislative, judiciary, put them collectively, is that kind of people-oriented leadership.
Okay, Professor. Professor,
beg your pardon? Yes.
Since you agree with him in toto, how would you then advise the electorate to identify these persons that you have painted the picture of?
That was the angle I was coming in. That beyond that, you need a people-oriented leadership.
Oh dear.
At work.
Okay. Let us go to Mr. Salihu Tanko Yakasai. The leadership Nigeria requires today, and if you agree with Prof. and Mr. Ezenwobodo, how do we identify these persons?
Oh dear, seems...
That's one.
Mr. Tanko Yakasai.
Okay, I think the network has dealt a heavy blow, but I mean, it's a good place to anchor the segment. Well, it's a conversation that is definitely ongoing, isn't it?
Definitely. We haven't covered all grounds at all.
Barely scratched the surface.
Because we need to know how we identify these people so that we can vote for them.
Exactly.
And vote for the right people. But we have to leave it here today. I'd like to thank Mr. Obioma Ezenwobodo, a legal practitioner who joined us from our studio in Abuja. Mr. Salihu Tanko Yakasai, 2023 PRP governorship candidate, who joined us latterly via Zoom, as well as Professor Ademola Abbas, Professor of International Law and Global Security. We do apologize for the, technology has all kinds of ideas of its own. We couldn't help it. So thank you very much for joining us this morning. And for those at home, thank you for staying with us. We'll be right back with another interesting conversation in just a moment.
Thank you for staying with us. Our focus now is on the Africa Climate Summit. The inaugural Africa Climate Summit in Nairobi is being billed as a major opportunity to push the links between clean energy and development across the continent. African heads of state, UN leadership, presidents and governments from different parts of the world are expected to attend. It is anticipated that Kenya, with a 100% clean energy target for 2030, will utilize the summit. We'll utilize the summit to showcase how renewables are fundamental to Africa's green growth pathway. A recent report on Africa's just transition, the continent's renewable energy potential, says that 50 times greater than the anticipated global electricity demand for the year 2040, which is 17 years away. Now, the continent also has more than 40% of the global reserves of key minerals for batteries and hydrogen technologies. Don't say it. Don't even say it. Well, let's have conversations this morning around this with two individuals joining us. Salisu Dahiru is Director General, National Climate Change Council. He joins us along with Nimo Bassi, who is Director, Health of Mother Earth Foundation, HOMEF. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Let us begin with you, Mr. Dahiru. What is it that we should expect during this particular summit?
Actually, there are two summits. There are two parallel events. There is the Africa Climate Summit, which is been organized by the government of Kenya, together with a number of partners, the African Union and the rest. And there's also the Africa Climate Week. These two events are going to take place in parallel, while the summit deals mainly with dignitaries from the public sector, heads of government and heads of ministerial bodies across the region. The Africa Climate Week, on the other hand, is a kind of a conglomerate of everybody, policymakers, civil society, practitioners, the businesses, as well as the industries. Now, these events are regional in nature because they are aimed at ensuring that we have an ideal platform to exchange ideas, particularly in terms of the challenges that we are facing and the existing solutions that are available, and look at opportunities that both those that have advanced, like the case you've just mentioned, as in the case of Kenya, with respect to their just energy transition target of 2030. And if you look at that, for countries like Nigeria that has its own energy transition plan with the target of 2060, then you begin to make comparisons and then learn lessons. And this is also going to serve as a clearinghouse prior to the major event of the year for the climate, which is the Conference of Parties, or COP, of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, UNFCCC, that is built to take place from November 30th to December 12th in Dubai, the United Arab Emirates. So in essence, this is what is to be played out in both events, both the summit and that of the...
Good place to start the conversation, Mr. Dahiru. But let me ask you, Mr. Bassi, you are one of 500, yours is one of 500 bodies who insisted on Africanizing, if I can use that term, this particular climate summit. What, in your opinion, necessitated that?
Well, civil society and other people who are not directly involved in terms of the driving seat of implementation of climate change from governments perspective on the continent are concerned that the African Climate Summit may be a missed opportunity. We're concerned that unless governments consider climate change as something that is about life or death, if it's about making some economic gains, then we're going to come out empty-handed, and then we'll go to COP28 on the same platform of looking for economic support without really carrying out the climate action that is needed. So we are concerned that the very basis of this conference, formulated by consultants and contractors who are more into market environmentalism, will cause serious gaps. We are also afraid that there may be a lot of false solutions brought onto the table. And so we're looking for a real climate summit where the voices of the people would be significantly listened to, rather than voices of those who are, again, trying to subjugate the continent, recolonize our continent, and promote policies that are not of our, that are not basically in our interests.
Mr. Dairo, this issue of zero emissions, some say it is not achievable ever. What are your thoughts, especially for African countries who don't have the kind of funds that developed countries have to be able to move from fossil fuels to cleaner fuels?
Thank you very much. I think there is a misconception here. There is nothing like zero emissions.
Well, we hear that expression all the time.
No, it tells you net zero.
Oh, net zero. I apologize.
It's a net zero concept, yes.
Okay.
What's the difference?
Okay, I mean, that's what I'm trying to explain. You see, there are two things. The concept of the net zero is simply saying that for every activity that you do that generates GHG, greenhouse gas emissions, what you are expected to do is to counter it by embarking on another activity that is carbon negative, meaning that it serves as a sink. When you do the calculations and you end up with the carbon negative aspect cancelling out the emissions that you've done on one hand, then you have a net zero. In fact, it is possible with the challenges that Africa has been experiencing, particularly in the area of, for example, the energy poverty, that is lack or access to energy because we are not even producing enough energy, and that we've already degraded our forests, we've degraded our mangroves, the areas that are serving as natural carbon dioxide sinks. If for example, if you take countries like Nigeria, Gabon, and the rest that are oil producing and are involved in fuel extraction, that part of that activity plus others are bringing out carbon emissions, and you maximize land restoration or forest restoration to the extent that the carbon emissions cancel out, then you are achieving net zero. So the idea is not to say that there will be zero emissions. No, it's not possible. Because even as a human being, we are bringing out carbon dioxide, so you are emitting. However, the plants that you have in your garden are taking up this carbon dioxide, and if you have enough plants in your garden, for instance, you have a plot, and the law says you should utilize only 40% of it. The remaining 60% is supposed to remain green. And you're able to achieve that, then it is possible for you, even as an individual, to have a net zero carbon footprint. That's just the explanation.
Okay, well, let me come back to you, Mr. Bassi. So this is where we are now. It is also said that the opportunities for Africa, even with the dire challenges, on the continent, Africa is home to about 60% of the best solar resources globally, and already solar is said to be the cheapest source of power in many parts of the continent, while 80% of new power generation capacity is renewable. But the money is still not within the reach of many. So how, in your opinion, do you think government intends to work out helping the citizens in this regard?
Okay, I think the first thing is for government to determine and decide that they're going to invest in renewable energy, because it's simply the solution and the way forward into a cleaner future. It's something that would not necessarily depend on the national grid. Right now, we have a national grid that collapses at very little provocation. And so if you have invest in renewable energy, you could have these distributed standalone in communities, remote locations, and everybody will have the sun. So this would solve the problem to a very large extent. But let me just also comment on the issue of the net zero, because it lays a very big, it makes a very fundamental, it requires a fundamental understanding so that we do know why we are concerned about monetization of environmental issues. Now, net zero, as we heard, Mrs. Dahiru explained it very well. It just means that you pollute, but at the same time, you compensate for the pollution. That's a very stark way to put it. So, but the truth is that this is being exploited by the powerful nation, by polluting industry. So a polluting industry in Europe could, for example, continue to pollute, do nothing to change their modes of production, and then they could pay for a forest in Nigeria or in Gabon or Congo, and then they would say, well, the trees in that forest in Africa is absorbing the carbon we are producing in Europe. So we keep on producing the carbon and do nothing about changing the mode of production. The problem is this: nature doesn't work by arithmetic. So you cannot say 2 units of pollution I release in Europe is cancelled by 2 units of carbon sequestration in Africa. Nature is much more complex than that. We have to get to a point where we know the real climate action is to move away from fossil fuels. And recently, just 2 weeks ago, there was a referendum in Ecuador, in Latin America, where the people voted against oil extraction in a place called Yasuni ITT. Now, that is one. That was a major more than 5 million people voted for leaving the oil in the ground, even though they know that that is worth billions of dollars and the country needs money. Costa Rica, for example, is a country that invests a lot in tourism, so they've decided not to extract fossil fuels so as not to pollute the environment and destroy tourism. In Berlin, is also in Latin America, no offshore drilling because they depend on fisheries as a major economic needs. So at the end of the day, nations have to decide if they want to work with nature and preserve lives and preserve future generations, or they want to believe in some calculation being made by those who want to procrastinate and avoid immediate climate action. The same thing with investing in renewable energy or continue to invest in dirty energy. It's a choice that has to be made. And it's political, it's social, it's economic, and it's cultural. We have to make that decision. It determines where we go once we've decided on that.
Okay. Well, Mr. Daru, do you think what Mr. Bassi just said is practical in Nigeria? Mr. Dahiru, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay.
Do you think his suggestions are practicable in Nigeria, given the example of those countries that have done it?
It is not. And if I go back to, if I borrow from Mr. Bassi's words, climate change and what we're doing in Africa must be looked at from the point of life or death for our communities. Nigeria, at the moment, thrives and gets most of its revenues from the oil sector. And you never, I don't subscribe to this notion that you throw the baby with the bathwater. If you have a faulty system that does not align with the best approach to ecosystem management on a global level, the idea is to look for the best methods to make that system more amenable to natural green growth. Not that you discard and say no to fossil fuels. At the moment, whether we like it or not, globally, there are two major sectors that cannot do without fossil fuel. If you take the shipping sector, there is no renewable energy that is going to be big enough or solid enough to provide shipping the necessary energy it requires. The same thing with the aviation. You are dealing with aircrafts carrying almost 800 people and carrying heavy load to travel for almost 16 hours in one go. Mm-hmm. Where is the solar technology that will provide the kind of energy that is required? So development will have to take place. The idea will be to make sure that it is in consonance with the best environmental practices. So, and for Nigeria, that is why Nigeria is insisting, as far as its own energy transition trajectory is concerned, natural gas must remain as a transition fuel. Nobody should expect Nigeria to leapfrog from fossil fuel to electric vehicles just overnight. We have the gas, it is readily available, we don't have to import it, and we have to use it for our own development. Thank you.
Mr. Bassi, poverty level is getting worse in Nigeria. And here we are talking about moving from fossil fuels to clean energy, which means, of course, environmentalists have been talking for years now about moving from cooking with firewood to cooking with gas. But because of happenings in our country in the last few months, it looks like more people are going back to firewood as a means of cooking. So, do you think that Nigerians are aware enough of this climate change thing to understand all that environmentalists and organizations and NGOs like yours are talking about?
Thank you. Well, Nigerians may not use the terminologies of technocrats and academics on climate change, but they do know about the changes that are happening and that things are not what they used to be. And so they know that the map of this nation is changing in terms of coastal erosion from sea level rise. Fisher folks will tell you that the ocean is getting warmer, so they're getting less fish. Desalinization, all kinds of changes. Desertification, people are losing land. And so people do know that changes are happening in a way that is not usual. But they may not call it climate change, but they do have different terminologies. Now, you mentioned the issue of people going back to firewood from using gas because of poverty. You know, one truth is that, what has happened in the last few months has shown the chokehold of the nation by the fossil fuel industry. We've depended too much on crude oil and gas for revenue, which wasn't always the case. And there are poorer nations around us who are much better off, who don't have oil or gas. How are they surviving? Their currency, some of which we used to laugh at, are now more powerful than the naira. We may have one of the lowest, poorest currencies in the world today. And so it's not all that we need. All has indeed caused a lot of tragic consequences in Nigeria. Let me mention one thing. In May this year, the Bayelsa Environment and Oil Commission issued a report showing that Bayelsa State is polluted to the level of 1.5 barrels of crude oil per person. That is the whole state. And they have some hydrocarbon pollution 1,000,000 times above safe standards. Now, life expectancy has gone down to 41. So when I don't have a life, what are you telling me is the benefit of a resource that's killing me? Gas flaring is going on by releasing millions of tons of carbon dioxide to the atmosphere before everybody's eye, continuously, not hidden. That's another pollution we don't even care to talk about. See, something that is unconstitutional, something that's against the right to life of the people, but it's going on day and night, harming the climate, harming everyone. Well, you could say, well, we could use that gas for cooking or for electricity production. That is true. That could be done. But we need to sit down. And in fact, the National Climate Change Commission should generate processes for having conversations with people at the grassroots about what is really happening and what needs to be done. There's a lot of wisdom out there, and it may not be from the ivory tower.
Very instructive there, but I'm still going to ask the same question, although differently from you, Mr. Dahiru. Not just the awareness, but the practical actions that Nigerians are taking, particularly at the community level, the various indigenous communities spread all over the nation. How aware, how significant would you say their awareness is in terms of climate change and all sorts? Because I'm not sure whether or not you can confirm that in different interior communities in the various parts of the country, the north, the south, the east, the west, north central, whether or not people are actually conscious of climate change issues and how they themselves internalize these thoughts in their daily lives. I ask this question because we're talking about these issues this way, but then it comes back to how we drill down the conversation about climate change to the locals for them to take ownership and actually champion it for you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think on one of the rare occasions I have this convergence with Nimobasi when it comes to the issue of awareness. I'll tell you, awareness about or being conscious of the effects or the impact of climate change. Everybody is feeling it. Let me just give you a few examples. For those of us that are maybe in the ivory tower, we have this habit of going home during the Yuletide seasons, and we will recall, for those of us that go around this time, the streams that we used to learn how to swim. Those streams are no longer there. Mm-hmm. And for the people in the villages that even are relying on firewood for cooking, as a child, when you are sent to get firewood from the bush, if you used to go just to your backyard and get the firewood that you needed or that is required in the house, in some places you have to go to several kilometers, and in some, no matter the distance that you've gone, you never see any firewood. The forest is not even there. If it is in terms of rainfall, you can predict when the so-called August break is supposed to happen in the southern part of the country, and when you are expected to have the heaviest amount of rainfall in the north during the month of August. Today, those lines are so blurred, it never happens. You get rainfall sometimes at odd times. Abuja, for instance, I know in the last 10 years, you could also experience rainfall even in January or even February. These are effects of climate change. And therefore, the way the rainfall even comes with so much rain, heavy storms and very strong winds that end up uprooting and removing roofs. These are also some of those consequences. The farmer in particular knows that when he plants his crop at a particular month, he knows that month is meant for planting, He knows when he is supposed to do the clearing. Today, that timetable is not as specific as it used to be. So those changes are known by our people, both individually and collectively, but linking these changes to climate change, the concept of climate change, I think is the missing link.
Which also raises the issue. My apologies, Mr. Salihu Dahiru. Which also raises the issue of the involvement of states now. I mean, the moment you talked about the farmer, well, my eyes goggled. I mean, like, literally, okay, so if the farmer knows this, then this whole conversation about food security is right there, you know, under attack, if I can use that term.
Right.
So it would seem then that the major stakeholders are not connected on this matter. You sit on the Council of the National Climate Change Council of Nigeria. So what's the plan to bring everybody on board and get everyone acting uniformly to address these challenges? Because, as you said, there's a river in my village. It used to be dreaded. Now it's probably a football field because the water is no longer there. And you are also very correct. We could take long treks to my grandfather's farm settlement. Today, it's almost like it's a lot closer because there is development all over the place now. So the whole farm areas are now built up. What's the plan to bring everyone on the same table and have this conversation around climate change so that we do not retrogress much faster than we should?
I think it is for the same reason that the National Council on Climate Change itself is actually a creation emanating from the efforts of civil society, including those that represent, the same stream like democracy and the parliament, to bring together a centralized body at the federal level that will be very inclusive in terms of its spread. Yes, ministers are members of the council, and it is headed by the chairman of the council is Mr. President, and the vice chair is the vice president, with about 10 line ministries. But it has, by law, representatives of the umbrella body for women's societies, the umbrella body for the private sector, for people living with disabilities, the civil society, and also the private sector involved in climate change. The idea is to have this central body that is at a level slightly higher than that of a ministry, in which it will serve as a platform and also as a rallying point, and will embark on this massive awareness creation and coordination in terms of policies, programs, and projects that will really reach the grassroots. We have on the council, as mandated by that same law establishing the council, the chairman of the Nigeria Governors Forum, as well as the president of ALGON, that is the umbrella body for all local government chairmen. The spirit being having them represent that sector means that states will continue to become part and parcel of this, the policy initiatives, the implementation strategies, and also the plan. And we've seen some positive response. We've seen states establishing ministries for environment and also climate change, and some, in fact, the last week we also saw even the chairman, the aviation, I think the head of the aviation sector, also alluding to the issue of a crisis and linking it up with climate change. So I see this coalescing in such a manner. For climate change, it has to be an issue of all of us coming together to complement the various roles. Civil society will definitely be the key player and the key policeman. for the environment and also for climate, and also representing the interest of the common people. And so we have this plan of having specific working groups that will focus on awareness creation and the key role of private sector and civil societies being championed along those lines.
Mr. Bassey, just before we go, because we need to start winding down now, the issues of financing are very important, especially for countries in Africa. Will such issues be discussed at this summit? And what kind of help will be available to the poor countries who will attend this summit? Mr. Bassey?
Right. I hope you're hearing me.
Yeah, I can hear you now.
My line is a bit shaky. Thank you. Yes, the issue of finance is very critical, and civil society and some communities across the world, especially in the global south, have been asking for a recognition of the climate debt that were being owed by the global north over years of exploitation, colonialism, and neoliberalism. Because we talk of climate finance, so much been promised since Copenhagen COP15, and up till now, the target set has never been met. Even the loss and damage is being threatened to be treated as charity rather than something that needs to be paid for adaptation purposes in the communities that are being impacted. So we are looking for policymakers to pick up this demand as for recognition of climate debt and payment of climate debt as something being owed, not as charity. It's something that we need because the world is a global problem and we need to tackle it together. But coming down again, finance has been always an issue that also leads to destruction of things that ought to support us, like deforestation. A state like Cross River has just lifted the ban on logging in the community forest protected forest. Now, if you go that way, you are creating more problems while you think you are raising funds. So we have to choose is life or money. What is more valuable? And the other thing with rich countries is rather than cut emissions, they are proposing all kinds of techno fixes that are not tested, they are risky, and could bring more harm to the world. Something like geoengineering, putting mirrors in the sky, sunshades in the sky, whitening the clouds, all kinds of proposals that would create more problems. We need to openly oppose them and call for actions that are working in line with nature.
I particularly like the part where you say that the climate debts. I hope there is also a climate police that's going to ensure that those bills are paid. We're completely out of time, gentlemen. We have to thank you so much for having this conversation with us this morning. Nimo Bassey is Director, Health of Mother Earth Foundation, HOMEF. Thank you so much for your time as well. Salisu Dahiru, Director General, National Climate Change Council. Thank you also for expatiating so much about this issue for us today.
Thank you.
Yeah. So we're back in a moment to talk about, still in this periphery, but it's a little different. Just stay with us. E-waste. What comes to your mind when you hear e-waste? It's not
remnants of computers.
Oh, really?
That's what comes to my mind.
Yeah, because some people will say e-waste. When you say e-waste, email, you know.
Say it well, e-waste.
E-waste, yes. Yeah,
no,
but then there's email. You don't touch it.
Electronic waste.
Electronic waste.
So it is not visible.
You know.
So what is it then?
Exactly. E-waste. Or not. Let's have conversations around this morning. Okay, so some people call it electrical and electronic equipment, which are including information and communication technologies, offer great opportunities for the world's development, guarantees high living standards and safety, and satisfies several needs. However, end-of-life equipment such as phones, laptops, sensors, televisions, washing machines, air conditioners, fridges, and many others pose considerable risks on human health and on the environment, especially if treated inadequately.
Environment again.
Environment again. That's why I said it's on the periphery the other time. You know, some people don't even know that most phones weren't made to, our guests will tell me. Some believe that most phones aren't made to last longer than 2 years.
Well,
that the end of life is
the way that a particular phone maker, that the name starts with A, is churning them out. Because once they churn a new one out, they'll make sure that there's some apps you cannot put on the old one, so you have to go and buy a new one. So do you blame those who believe that?
So let's have the conversation this morning with Omo Alokwe, who is CEO Street Waste. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. As well as Ibuko Falu, Executive Secretary, E-Waste Producers Responsibility Organization of Nigeria. Thank you.
Thank you for
joining us. Well, I don't want to start that combustible conversation about the duration, the lifespan of a phone. Do I? They don't want me to go there. Okay. So,
okay, but what is the... You can whisper, What's the lifespan of a phone?
Don't know so much about that. I only know about the waste part. So let's focus on that.
It becomes a waste, doesn't it, when you have to discard?
Absolutely.
So it's part of the waste.
Well, I think you want...
Okay, so for e-waste, it's when it reaches the end life, and there are times for the phone, you can still go refurbish it, but once it reaches its end life, you can call it a waste.
Like 1 year, 2 years down the line?
Okay, I can't give a number to that.
Okay, but just to be clear, so what are e-waste's local generation patterns?
Well, in Nigeria, we like to, kind of repair, refurbish most of the waste that are really discarded. So we have lots of phones, and Nigeria is quite developing with a lot of electronic equipment coming up. And most times, if they get to their end life, we are able to discard them.
Do we really discard them? Anyway.
Ibuku, we see a lot of carcasses of air conditioners and washing machines have all the things that can destroy our health and the environment being removed from all those carcasses?
No, not all the time. A lot of times, things that can destroy the health and environment are in them. And part of the reason why we have set up, why Apron was set up is because of those kind of issues. Because one, a lot of people are not even aware that a lot of things that can harm the environment and human health are in there. And so they go about handling it in very horrible manners, in a way that will really make us exposed to the hazard of those items that are hazardous in them. So it's now important to transition from that approach to something better, where at the end of life, we handle it in a way that will not harm the environment and the humans.
Do we have legislation around e-waste in the country?
Yes.
Yes, we do.
Yes, we do.
Okay, so what are these?
What does it say?
So,
Okay,
go ahead.
you want to go?
No, you can go ahead.
So basically, it talks about, it's a regulation around the electrical and electronic equipment as a whole, not just at the end of life when it's e-waste. For the entire life cycle, it was developed in 2011, but it was revised recently, and the revised regulation came up in December 2022. So basically, it puts the responsibility to manage e-waste at its end of life on the producers. That's the Extended Producer Responsibility Program. I'm sure you've heard it so many times. And that's why an organization like Apron was set up by producers to make sure that they go about managing the end of life electrical and electronic equipment. But it also puts the responsibility, it talks about the shared responsibility for everybody in terms of the consumers, the collectors, what they will do, the recyclers, and what have you. So for one, it stops informal recycling activities and says only recyclers with accredited centers should carry out recycling. And then all those informal people can just hold on to collection and then collect from consumers. It also makes consumers responsible for not putting e-waste with municipal solid waste and taking it back to collection centers?
Yeah, that's a whole conversation that I'm not sure many people are aware of. Do you think?
Yes, not many people are aware of that, and that's why we have EPRON, which are the PRO for the extended producer responsibility, like she just rightly said. And we at Streetways Company, we are accredited collectors, and so we create awareness within our local community regarding this e-waste to make them understand why they need to actually sort this out and not put it together with the general waste. Also,
so if I see the carcass of a washing machine sitting somewhere, I can give you a call. Come and pick it up.
yes, you can.
Oh,
So
okay.
when some people are still using e-waste right now, it's still very active in the house. Yes or yes?
If it's being used, then it's not e-waste.
It's not
Then
waste.
e-waste. It doesn't reach its end life.
Oh, you think so?
That's it. You know so.
It's already reached the end line, but we are refurbishing. You talked about refurbishing.
Yes, so it's part of
By that I'm asking, when does it become a hazard?
Okay, so when it's at the point of disposal. So at that point of disposal, you need to dispose your e-waste. Then you have to think how you have to properly dispose it. So you don't put it together with all the general waste, and then it becomes an hazard because of the handling.
Okay. We have to dispose of it properly. Which is the proper way of disposing of our electronics and things like that?
Yes, so that's why it's right now, there's the regulation with EPRON that it needs to be recycled. And we have accredited...
But I can't recycle it. So what do I do with this? For instance, I have an air conditioner that I want to get rid of. What do I do with it?
Yes, you reach out to collectors like us that would come collect them at your doorstep.
Okay, and how do we locate collectors?
Okay, on the EPRON's website, we have a number of collectors, accredited collectors on their website.
Because you people, we can't see you on the streets. Your name is Streets. What did you call it?
Streetways.
Streetways. So you are not on the streets.
And we are in your community.
Oh, okay. So, madam, you've talked about collectors as critical actors in the EEE value chain. What are the other critical actors?
We've also talked about the recyclers.
Okay.
And also the consumer. The consumer is very key, because if the consumer is not aware of all these issues we are discussing about and also taking it back to the collection centers, then all of this is not going to work. So the consumer is very important. The regulators are also very important, because if they do not try to enforce the provisions that they've made, then it's not going to work. So basically everybody is involved if you look at it, because you are either a consumer or you're a collector. And I mean, when you look at it, we are all consumers. Even kids have toys that's, become electronic waste.
Electronic toys,
yeah.
Yes.
Even there's no matter how old you are, even if you're 90, you have a mobile phone, you have like a BP monitor, you have different things that are generally going to become electronic waste. So it's a regulation that affects everybody.
Do batteries fall in this category? Because we're always told dispose properly or something. Don't just throw it in your trash can.
Yeah.
They're included?
They're included.
Okay. So these things are collected. Some of them are refurbished. Some of them are cannibalized. Now, the refurbished cell phone, for instance, is cheaper than a new phone. Why are you laughing, for God's sake?
No, something else. For she was looking at me.
Where can one access these refurbished electronics or e-waste when they have stopped being e-waste and they are now useful again because they've been refurbished? Where can we access them?
So some recyclers, because they do the refurbishing, they have access to all of this, and we're all very familiar with our almighty computer village in Lagos, where they sell a lot of refurbished items as well for different things in the value chain. Some repairers also, if you go to areas where you have repairers of fridges, they know how to make it new and fresh, and and then they give it a list of which is actually very good, because when we are talking about the circular economy, it comes higher on the hierarchy of what we need to do in terms of reduce, reuse, repair, refurbish. So refurbishment is very good. It gives it a longer life, and then while doing that, you're reducing energy needs for making new products from extracting materials, and a lot of material conservation is going into that aspect as well. More importantly, you're reducing climate change, which is something you just finished talking about.
Exactly.
Because that's associated with a lot of...
Okay, there is this thing that I don't know of any other state, but I reside in Lagos, have begun to do in some communities, and that is to literally give you 2 separate kinds of dustbins that you must use. One is for
plastic,
food waste,
general waste.
The other is for recyclable. Tell us about it. Why are you laughing? Because people just have those dustbins. It's so fancy to have 2 dustbins in front of your house.
Okay, so that's the LOMA is making it mandatory for households to encourage households to start to sort their waste. So from there, they get to have the understanding that, some items can be recycled, and that's why you have the recyclable bins and the other ones for the general waste. So it's more of a way of creating awareness. It begins from there. So once they have the 2 bins, they understand that their waste needs to be sorted right from the source.
Okay, educate us some more. What kind of things should go in the recyclable bin?
Okay, so items like plastic. I'm talking about the PET bottle for the beverage drink, the bottled water, items
paper.
Yes, paper, items like beverage cans, like the can mold, items like corrugated carton for the packaging.
Yes.
And yes, thereabouts, you can have that. However, for the e-waste, it's advisable not to mix it with those type of items. Why? Because it is hazardous. It's quite different. So for the e-waste, it's better if check for collectors on the EPRON website and give us a call to pick it up. Because the collectors are more informed on how to handle those kind of waste.
Does it cost me anything if I call you to pick it up?
Cost you as in to pay to pick it up?
Yes.
No.
So you just come and you pick it up and you go, business over?
Yes.
Okay.
So if I have, I'm suspecting this is your smile.
Alexis.
So, excuse me. So if I have an air conditioner or what's that thing, a washing machine that is outdated, I can just call you. I put it outside my house. You just carry and you go. You don't have to see me.
Okay, we advise not to put it outside of the house because of rain and all that. So once you give us a call, we schedule a time for pickup with you. So it's at the point of pickup, you then give it to us.
Okay. Now, I asked this question the other time, but I think we need to say it better. At what point, because you talked about end of life, but I'm not particularly comfortable, satisfied. At what point does e-waste become hazardous? I ask that question because some people would have a dead phone in their house forever. And then at some point they say, you know what, I'm just going to throw it in the dustbin. And that's it. But it's been in the house for a while. Now, you say once it gets to end of life, it is hazardous to health. At what point does it become hazardous? I know when it becomes an e-waste. Is it so much of a hazard that if I don't dispose of it properly, my life is at risk or the life of my family is in jeopardy?
Okay, so there are 2 things. E-waste, like the products, all these things are harmless if you let it be without tampering with it.
Such like opening it up?
Yeah.
Okay.
But another thing is also, some of them contain batteries. And so if you keep it there, ordered forever, it could start degenerating on its own because we all know how batteries can react after some time, depending on where you keep them. So the best thing is just give it to somebody that knows how to manage it immediately. It's of no use to you at that point. And, the collectors are well trained. We've done this manual that we're even going to use to start training them again from next week, Tuesday. And especially on things like data protection, because when you see a lot of people don't want to give up this e-waste because they feel, there's a lot of data in my phone. I don't know what they can do with it. But these people are well trained. They understand all the data protection issues associated with this, and they are willing to take up responsibility that, okay, if you can put these things in our hands and we'll pass it on to the formal recycler. So what can make it hazardous is if you put it into the hands of people that will misuse it because they want to take the valuable parts and then they throw the other parts off, which is because they'll just pick what they need. Usually what they need is a panel. And then they just throw the batteries away, they throw the plastics away. And those are where the real issues are. The batteries contain lead, sometimes lithium ion, and those are very hazardous to the environment. Some other times, then the plastics are flame retardants, but brominated flame retardants impregnated with them. And so those are endocrine depleting substances that once they go into the environment, they cause a lot of harm, and you can't contain them. They don't stay where they keep traveling, and they settle in the fatty tissues of human body, causing a lot of harm. So those are the kind of issues that can be associated with them. And I've also mentioned if you put them in the house, I'm sure that there are sometimes you've put something with batteries, and then you go back, you see it's already sipping. There's water coming up from the batteries and all of those things. So he has no business being in your house once it's no longer functional. Just give it up to people that can either give it a good life, because it's materials, like you've said. If it can be refurbished, it's good for the circular economy. If it can be recycled, it's also good for the circular economy, and it's good for the environment, and a lot of jobs are being created in that space for people.
Now, do you pay to collect any kind of waste? Is there any category of waste that you pay to collect?
Maybe like a car. Just saying, come on.
Okay, so at Street Waste, we are more focused on recyclables. So we don't collect the general waste. But for the general waste, yes, household pays to collect them.
I'm talking about e-waste now.
For the
Is there any
e-waste
category? Because instead of just calling you to come and pick up my inverter batteries, for instance, I'll call the inverter guy who will pay me money to take it away.
Yeah, so there are incentives attached to certain types of...
which ones, please?
Basically, all of them, the ones that have less of incentives are things like lamps. But even to encourage people to give them up, we're trying to attach some incentives to the process.
To what particular items, for instance?
Everything has an incentive to it. It's just that the incentive varies according to the product.
So if you come to pick up a car now, for instance.
We don't do cars. So
that's not e-waste.
It's what?
Waste.
So you don't...
When they become electric vehicles, when we start using electric vehicles, then it's e-waste.
We need to invite...
With all the electric, whatever it is that is inside the vehicles already?
We need to invite Mustafa Gajibo to come to Lagos and convert our cars to electric cars. So that when the cars now...
Can we just humble ourselves and start with CNG? Thank you very much. Okay. Now, madam, I can say that generally, and you may also want to speak to it, the fact that we don't have enough collectors in the city. Would you say we do?
Okay, yes and no. So we have collectors. I'll speak for Lagos. So we have collectors in different areas of Lagos. So for the recycling industry, we have we are registered under LOMA, and we have an association whereby we actually know ourselves at different areas. Like for our own collection centers, we have collection centers on the Highland, Fadi Axis, Yaba Axis, Fadi, okay. Yaba, and Ikoyo Balindi Axis. So we cover that areas. So there are other collectors too that are located in particular areas where they are able to cover as well. So I think it's been getting the right information about those collectors and where they are and how to reach out to them. I think that's the main challenge.
Can you give us your website so that
please.
Anybody who's interested can go there and get the list of collectors in case they have anything that they want, any e-waste that they want to dispose of.
Yeah. So www.epron.org.ng.
EPRON.org.ng.
Okay. So I asked her a question and she's trying to be nice about it. Okay, yes, I mean, that's your website, right?
Yeah, it is.
Good. You are shocked. Yes, we like that kind of shock. Do you think we have enough? It's a city of about minimum, okay, that's the list of collectors all over the place.
Yeah.
So I was asking the question whether you think we have enough collectors, because it's only when you come here that some people are, oh, these people exist indeed. You understand? Do you think we have enough? It's a city of 20 to 22 million people.
Okay, so you're very correct that we do not have enough. And very recently, we advertised to get more collectors. We're hoping that we can have at least one collector in each of the LCDs in the state. Right now, we have about 30 to 34 collectors. And then we recently...
Statewide?
Yes, Lagos State. We are rolling another 8. And we're working across the 6 geopolitical zones. Now we're working with, we're trying to work with Kano State, Adamawa State, Rivers State, Abia State, Abuja, and
over the place.
Some different places, yeah. So with Adamawa State, we've made a lot of progress. We've gone to inspect the collection facilities. We've got about 40-something applications in the state. We've gone to inspect. We're already set to select some that we're going to use to start from in all those states. And then we've also advertised for Abuja as well. And then, we've started getting applications for that. So we know that the collection centers are not enough. And we're doing a lot to spread that out. But, people also need to have this information about the value of this and knowing that this is something that they can apply for. This is a business opportunity. And we're also looking at ways to work with retail centers to...
Okay.
Yeah.
So if anybody is watching now and is interested, what do they do?
They should just reach out to us on info@epron.org.ng.
Okay.
info@epron.org.ng.
Your website is fine.
Thank you.
Now, let me come back to you, madam. So, the name of your organization is Street Waste, right?
Yes.
I suspect you know where I'm going.
No.
Do you collect wastes on the streets?
So we are closer to you. We are within your community. So we run community recycling centers. Right now we have like 3. So we ensure to be closer to the community because that's where most of the waste is being generated. And that is where the name came from, because we want to be closer to the community as much as possible.
The reason I asked that question is because going on the road sometimes, you definitely see e-wastes all over the place. Computer hardware, keyboards, mouses,
mice.
Living or dead phones, old irons, those ones that were made in 1970, and the rest of them. So that's why I asked that question.
Okay, so regarding that, we work with informal sectors that actually go around, pick all these things around the street. Yes, we work with them.
I see young men going around picking up plastics. So they deliver them to you?
Yes, they do, and they get incentives for it.
Including the ones that just go to the walls of people and pull their...
Okay,
have you seen the video?
Pull what?
They pull the light bulbs from people's fences and put them in a bag.
Okay, so we have... how would I call them? We have there is an association for informal waste pickers, and those are the people we actually work with because they are trained, they are informed on what to do, and there are some that are not a part of that association. So we ensure to work with those people so that because they are well informed and trained regarding what to do. And
what to look out for, what to bring.
Yes.
They also have ID cards, so you know that these are people that can
verified.
Authorized
collectors.
So you can give to them whatever e-waste. And those people will not go and pick up anything that they've not been given because they understand what the code of practice for the business is.
I think maybe you should actually have a police to your own e-waste police.
So if you're interested in being an e-waste collector, you can reach out to EPRON via info@epron.org. And if you want more information about EPRON, www.epron.org.ng.
That org is ORG, by the way. Now, you for those who are wondering, what importance does this new smart training manual, what does it have?
Like I've been mentioning since, it's important that the collectors themselves understand how they should work and the hazards in the different types of e-waste that they are collecting. So if you look at the manual, it helps them to understand where is all this coming from, even from the regulatory point of view. Why is there a regulation for electronic waste in the first place? Why are we bringing regulations about it? They need to understand what are the hazards, and even up to the point of helping them to understand all the conventions that Nigeria has ratified that has to do with it, the Montreal Protocol that talks about ozone depleting substances, the Basel Convention on management of waste. So they get to know all of that. They also get to understand the substances of concern in the different e-wastes, how they should handle them, what kind of receptacles are best for each kind of e-waste that they collect from their consumers. And so they can then even reinforce within their communities, create more awareness about e-waste, and also reinforce to the informal people that they're dealing with that you can't continue with the practice of burning cables, the practice of breaking up e-waste, because you're going to be harming the environment. And then, they just cascade down that training to the people in their space. And then they use it also to benefit. I talked earlier about the data protection. So they get a lot of more information about that. The health and safety of themselves and everybody around them in the process. Even the transportation process for carrying e-waste, because we don't just want you using the same vehicle you use to transport vegetables to transport e-waste.
It's not very good. Anyway. We have to thank you very much for being here this morning to educate us. A good number of people are wondering, okay, so now I have e-waste. I didn't even know I did. Thank you so much for your time this morning. Ibukun Falui is the Executive Secretary, E-Waste Producers Responsibility Organization of Nigeria, EPRON, as well as Omo Alokwe, CEO, Street Waste. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you so much for having us.
Okay. Well, you have been told that if you keep e-waste in the house, it could actually be stemming towards committing suicide.
So there is waste and there is e-waste.
There is e-waste. It's not email.
E-waste. And there's a special way of disposing of your e-waste. If you have any e-waste, please feel free to contact the collectors. They will pick it up.
They are not tax collectors, by the way, just say.
Just e-waste pickup people. Collect your e-waste and do the needful with it.
We'll be right back.
Welcome back, and thank you for staying with us. Kill myself? Why? Why would I want to do that? You wake up every morning and you thank God for having slept well, and you thank God that you woke up this morning. You thank Him for life. So why would you then by afternoon decide you want to take your own life? Well, there are many reasons why people go into depression and actually consider ending it all. I've had enough. But they say it's a mental health issue.
It has to be.
So we have Chris Aboje here to talk to us about this and the incidence of depression. Poverty is driving more people into depression, which means that we're going to have more cases of suicide. Good morning, Chris, and welcome.
Good morning. Always a pleasure to be here.
Let me begin.
Pleasure, but I'm not happy to talk about this at all.
Well, yes.
It's a very sad topic to be talking about.
And depressing too. I get it. Let me start with this angle. People don't know this, but it is said that it is a crime to attempt to kill yourself.
Oh, yes. Well, according
Is it not my life?
And I don't want it anymore. Is it by force?
Well, it sounds funny. But yes, I think, again, the Lunacy Act of 1958, if I'm correct, actually says that it's a crime to...
1958?
Yes.
You mean they've been committing suicide since that time?
Even before then. Suicide is as old as mankind.
Judas committed suicide. What are you talking about?
Judas is different.
Okay, so first, we need to realize that, yes, people who, maybe made up that act were not so informed. The good thing is that we have a bill that was passed in January this year, even though it doesn't speak specifically about suicide, but it talks about protecting the human rights of people with mental health conditions. And so if we can look at suicide as a mental health concern, then we need to really protect them instead of criminalize them as what the previous
law did.
Is it a mental health issue?
Oh, yes, it is. Nobody would think of ending their own life, except there's a problem, except there's a challenge.
I find that, forgive me, it may sound a little cynical, but I find that sometimes hard to believe. You talked about poverty and the rest of them. I found that it's not the same reason. I heard the story, for instance, of an individual who grew to the highest, perhaps even to the presidency level. He wasn't president, but he was working, with the head of government in one of these highly developed countries, and woke up one day and decided, is that all there is to it? And then he went and committed suicide.
Robin Williams killed himself. He was a very successful actor.
Exactly. Okay. So why would that? I mean, it's not a function of.
It's not poverty.
It's not poverty.
Well, so that's one of the reasons why it's a mental health concern. So when you think about mental health, think about the way you think, the way you feel, and how you respond. That's basically what mental health is all about. But before I go on, I need to really talk about the use of words like killing yourself, for example. We talked about criminalizing it. When you use words like that, it almost, fits into that criminal nature that you're doing something wrong.
Well, isn't that what it is?
But no, we would probably use the word someone attempts suicide, for example, rather than even saying someone committed suicide or someone killed themselves. Or someone died by suicide, right?
Okay.
So you either attempt, you have thoughts of suicide, or you died by suicide. Again, that helps us understand that they are victims and they are not necessarily criminals in that sense. Oh. Now, speaking of why people would, attempt suicide, there are many reasons. Mental health concerns could be one of them. Another reason for me, and this is more of experiential in my practice, I have seen people attempt suicide and then come into therapy, after a period of time, come back to you and ask you the same question, which is, why was I trying to end my life? Right? I've seen that. In fact, there's a simple joke about the person who wanted to attempt his life, went into the forest, hung the tree, and saw a python, and then ran out of the
the python eats you, and
so
put an end to it.
It's funny, but it gives us that idea that many people who attempt suicide do not do it from a conscious state or a totally deliberate state. And so my theory, and this is from experience and practice, is that many people who are suicidal get to a point where they are stuck. Right? They are stuck mentally. Now, it doesn't have to, you might be looking at it from the external perspective and say, hey, you can fix this. But at that point where they are, they feel there's no way out. Now, what I also have seen in experience is that nobody wakes up one morning and just thinks of ending their life. Usually it grows, right? So it starts with something like, why am I here? Or what can I do to fix this? How do I deal with this? And then it keeps on evolving. When they can't find a way out, it keeps on evolving. What if I wasn't here? What if I could just leave this thing? And then what if I could just end my life, right? So it's usually a progression that eventually gets to the point where suicide becomes the option for that person. But we know that it's not the only option. And so our job is to help them see things from a different perspective and help them fix whatever challenges makes them feel stuck. Yes.
The scary part for me is the fact that it is not just circumstantial. Mm-hmm. So people could actually be in that sphere and not even know that they are being suicidal, right?
Oh, yes. Okay. Some people can.
At what point does anyone need to begin to recognize? What are the telltale signs, subtle or prominent or pronounced, that will make someone know that this fellow is suicidal?
Okay, so suicide can be the reason, can result from many things. Mental health concerns like depression, for example. But we say that depression is not the only thing that leads to suicide. So someone can be suicidal and not be depressed, right? Substance use also can lead people to being suicidal. But some of the signs that you should look out for is things like they begin to talk about death, for example. It's begin to talk about how meaningless life is, or they begin to ask questions about the meaning of life. In some cases, you could see some people begin to withdraw. That could also give you a hint. It's not necessarily a guarantee that the person who withdraws is suicidal, but again, that's one of the signs that we see is social withdrawal, loss of interest in things they used to love doing before. They start to talk about it and plan about it, so they could go online and start to research. Oh, if I were to die, well, how would I? What's the best way? What's the simplest way? Something like that.
People do research such things.
Yeah, they do research that. So, I've had clients who tell me, oh, I've researched 1,000 ways to die, or, 10 ways to die. And there's a movie, I think, like that. And that would also be that person's kind of favorite movie. They usually are attracted to dark themes in terms of stories, negative stories, things that are not so pleasant. And if you were to look at the person's DM, for example, it would give you a hint. So either a tear, someone crying, or just a dark, things like that tells us that the person is in a mentally, stuck state. Talking about it, planning about it. Previous attempts as well could also be something you look out for. If somebody has had a previous attempt before, there's a likelihood that they would attempt again. And then the use of substance. Some people, when they use substances, it affects the cognitive reasoning, the ability to really assess things and look at things from a whole perspective. And that can predispose them.
Sometimes, this whole conversation about substance use is very, very interesting. Because what could be hazardous to someone could just be the playfield of some others. I, for instance, I can't take coffee, even to save myself. I can't. I love the aroma, but how will I now just prepare coffee and just be wafting the aroma into my nose without taking it? But so for me, that could be substance. I mean, forgive me.
So caffeine is substance, actually. Regardless of whether you like it or not. Many people don't want to hear this, but it is a substance. And so we need to take note of that as well.
Now you know.
Yeah. You don't want to hear it, but I'm saying it.
That's the truth.
Okay, so now with these telltale signs, how do you begin to intervene? Or what do you say to someone who you suspect might be? There are those who could just decide.
How do you even start the conversation?
Exactly. Because there are those who would decide, you know what, I want to be offline for a while. God forbid, the next thing you know, you're hearing stories. So how do you begin that conversation with someone who you suspect could
be in a dark place?
Well, so I'll start by saying the good news is that even though our practice is strongly built on confidentiality, right? One of the areas where you can break confidentiality is things like suicide, when a person is trying to hurt themselves or hurt people around them. And so for me, the first thing anyone who wants to have that conversation should do is, work on themselves, which is change the mindset that people who attempt suicide are criminals, for example, are ungrateful, for example. All those negative thoughts we have towards it, and then change it to a perspective that they need help. They are probably stuck, right? And so once you're able to do that, you then want to have the conversation where you are able to validate how they feel. Right? Not telling them, oh, go and do it, but helping them understand that it's okay not to be okay, for example, but also understand that anyone who were to think that they were stuck in that state might be thinking of that as well. And let me give you a practical example from my practice. Sometimes, like I said, I've had people who would attempt and come back and say, why was I doing this? So what I do with them is that I take them back to what happened. And I ask them a question, which is, at the point when you were attempting suicide, what was going through your mind? And they'll tell me something like this, that I thought that I have lost everything. So I would ask the follow-up question, which is, what would losing everything look like for you? and they say, oh, you know what, maybe I lost my house, my job, my family, my everything. And I said, if somebody came to you and said to you, I want to end my life because I've lost all these things, would you understand? And say, I would understand that, right? So what that does for me to them is to help them see how at that state where they were, regardless of the situation, the way they saw it, suicide seemed like the option. So validating the person is the first step to go. To say, hey, you know what, if anybody thought they've lost everything, if anyone thought life was hopeless, the question is, why do I need to continue? So that means that suicidal thoughts for that kind of person would be validated. But I can then move on to helping them see how maybe life isn't hopeless, right? Whereby I'm able to see that, help them see a different perspective.
But you know, sometimes when you have invested so much in a business, you have invested so much in a relationship, you have invested so much in, as a parent, you've invested so much into something or someone. I heard the story of, was actually told to me by the individual concerned. She was preparing to get married, and she had a, what's that lady? Bridesmaid. And she already assigned, got herself a bridesmaid, but she just needed to travel for a bit. By the time she came back, she saw a wedding invitation of the bridesmaid and her husband-to-be.
Oh, my God.
Now, that's definitely one department to be stuck in, isn't it? Having invested so much in both the friendship and in that relationship, how does that person see anything beyond?
Beyond
really
suicide.
Beyond, yes.
Beyond suicide. So the question is, so the person in that situation would think, oh, you know what, I've lost everything or something like that,
Exactly,
right?
I've lost
It's
everything.
everything. Friendship and relationship.
Okay, but the question I would ask that person, maybe not in actual therapy, but because we're talking, is to say that, if you have a friend and you have a spouse-to-be who would do this to you, don't you think you just dodged a bullet?
True.
So that's a different way to look at it. So rather than looking at it as, oh, you know what, I just lost someone, you should be looking at it as, oh, wow.
Thank God.
I'm happy that I lost you now, or this happened right now, than when we got married. Let's assume this didn't happen. They got married, and then only to find out that the man was still seeing her best friend. That would even be more devastating.
Yeah.
And that would have also deprived her of actually finding somebody who really cares about her. So that's a different way to see it.
Perspective.
Exactly.
How about...
But what are the signs for someone, if you're living, for instance, with your husband, and your husband is having those dark thoughts, what are the signs that I would see to know that he was in a dark place?
Okay, so I mentioned a few of them earlier. And number one way is the conversations that the person has. When they speak to you or when they speak about anything, they are more likely going to be seeing things from a dark perspective. So,
as opposed to optimistic.
Exactly. Sometimes they will tell you, oh, I was just joking, but we don't believe there's anything called a joke in situations like that. So you can just say, oh, let everybody just die like that or something like that, right? That gives you so if the person jokes about it once, it might not be enough to just conclude, but once it becomes consistent, that could be a sign. Now, if it's in a case where this person has a mental health concern like depression, for example, you would also see behavioral signs, right? For example, the loss of interest in things they used to love doing before. They want to stay more in bed, for example. You might find them resorting to some risky behaviors, maybe substance use, for example, drinking more just to, mask the struggle that they're going through. Some of those things, some people, beyond suicide, there's also something called self-harm, where people deliberately hurt themselves as a way of masking the emotional pain that they feel, right? So you see this mostly with teenagers, cutting themselves. Those are ways that, and when you speak to them, they will tell you it helps to numb the emotional pain. Now, before you look that way, there is a science behind it.
The physical pain.
Exactly.
Dulls the emotional pain.
Yes. There's a science behind it. The science behind it is that when you experience physical pain, your body secretes a chemical called endorphins. Endorphins are like the natural form of opiates, pain relievers. So that pain reliever creates a pleasurable feeling. But the challenge here is that it's only temporal. So after numbing the pain,
see the way I'm looking at you.
You are conscious and the problem is still there.
The problem is still there.
Exactly. So our job is to teach people how to, be more solution focused.
Okay. One of that
escaping.
Yeah. One of that thing that could be responsible for this would be grief.
Oh yes, yes.
And I have just come to this understanding that grief is not just the loss of someone.
Mm-hmm.
You could grieve the loss of a job. You could grieve the loss. You could grieve the loss of something you hold very, very precious, like your phone or iPad, or your diamond.
Yeah. Or your shoes. Or your shoes.
Telling you, right?
Or your shoes. Yeah.
Did you hear that?
Shoes. Anything you lose that holds value to you could take you through the grief experience,
which could lead to suicidal thoughts.
Exactly. So grief is actually a healing process.
Chris.
Yes.
Move on. Get off the ground and move on. You still have life. What else? What else do you want?
It's easy for you. So this is what we're trying to change, actually, because there are some people that can speak the way you're speaking because of the experiences you've had, but not everybody can. And that's what leads to some people, being stuck in that state. Our job is to, with empathy, and being non-judgmental, guide them through that experience.
Can you speak to someone right now and just tell them they need to get out of that rut, no matter how slowly, but surely deliberately?
Well, so yes, I would say that for anyone here anyone out there who is experiencing suicidal thoughts, I would say to you first that your emotions, your experiences validated, but I also would want to mention that even though you're having those thoughts, it didn't start that way. And these thoughts are just your mind's way of calling your attention to something that you need to fix. You must have been trying to do this, and it looks like there's no way out. But maybe that's because you're trying to do it alone. And so helping or reaching out to someone to help you or to guide you through that process might just be what gets you out of that phase. You need to know that you're not a criminal, but there are people out there that are trained to help you through this experience. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Grace. Some say that the true test of character is when you fall, just get up and move on. When you fall, it is not the end of the world. It is not the end of your life. Get off the ground and move on. You still have life.
Yeah.
That's a good place to leave it. Thank you very much for coming, Chris.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Okay. So, you're still... Okay, while she is still reeling from that one, we'll be right back for the home stretch. Do stay with us. Well, that sound is that of Segun Oluwayomi. Of course, the picture that you also saw there. He's called the Arugbo Ojo crooner, not Arugbo Ojo. Please look straight. Look straight. And it's a multiple award-winning gospel saxophonist in Nigeria.
Arugbo Ojo.
Yes.
What does that mean?
Ancient of Days.
Okay.
Days. Ojo. You know?
Arugbo Ojo. Ancient.
Good morning
days.
and thank you for being here.
Good morning, sir.
I'm sure that this kind of conversation is not strange to you.
No, at all. Not strange to me at all.
Oh, really?
I eat almost every day.
Not
Really.
all of us speak Yoruba. Thank you very much.
Tried, like I said earlier, yes.
So, what do some
I
other people
speak
Oh.
call?
Lagos Yoruba.
Some will call it Ojo.
Ojo.
Thanks for being here this morning.
You're welcome, sir. Thank you for having me, sir.
Well, you've told your story countless times, you know, but you know, there's a good. It will seem like there was an avalanche of many people wanting to play the saxophone some years ago. It seems like we have been able to separate the wheat from the chaff now.
The boys from the men.
The boys from the men. You remember that time?
Yes,
Everyone wanted to play a saxophone.
30 years ago.
Yes. Everybody wanted to play the saxophone, but now...
Because of Fela or what?
No, because of Okay, tell me.
Okay, it was a call in my church that was over 30 years ago. I was writing one of my examinations in secondary school. My choir master then, Pastor Emu Awujobi, said, we need to teach some of our children musical instruments, so come and put down your name. So a lot of people went for guitars, keyboard, saxophone. They now left trumpet behind because they thought trumpet is difficult to learn and to play. So by the time I came from the school, and I saw that it was only trumpet that was available, I had to pick it. It's not that I like trumpet, but I picked it and I made sure that I know how to play it very well. And that really helped me in playing other musical instruments. And saxophone too, because they are a bit similar to each other.
But it seemed to me that, you know, the wave for playing the saxophone came from when Pastor Kunle Ajayi released that album, Dew of Herman.
Yes.
That it was such a popular album. And everybody wanted to play the saxophone. And I was like, hey, can you guys calm down? You know, there are other musical instruments, even wind instruments. So how does it feel being one of the men separated from the boys?
Well, firstly, all the glory to the one that sits on the throne. Because like I said, I really wanted to play saxophone, and there was no saxophone then when we were aspiring to be a musician in Lorraine. Then, like I said, they left trumpet behind and I took it. And when I played the trumpet for a while, fortunately for me, I saw a man in Lorraine that has saxophone. The very first day I picked saxophone, I played about 5 keys, which is very unusual for somebody that is playing it for the first time. And since that time, I've been enjoying the grace on saxophone. And with this saxophone, I've been able to even get to where I never believe I would get to in life.
How are your lungs?
Most people ask this question. I don't think my own is divine. He knows. Because I've played this saxophone several times that a lot of things happening that even me myself, I'm amazed that playing saxophone, God is healing somebody of cancer. Playing saxophone, God is doing a lot of wonders. Just hearing my saxophone. So God that has been doing that through me will not allow anything to happen to me. There was a particular time my doctor said your heart is big. The left part of this thing is big. That was an attack, not the saxophone. I didn't argue with the doctor. I just went to my closet. I picked that same sax. I was worshiping God with the sax. I was playing the saxophone, and God healed me. By the time I went back to the doctor, I cannot see anything again. That was divine. So it can only happen by God himself.
So I'm going to ask again, how are your lungs now?
Perfectly okay.
Question answered.
Do they get bigger because you play this kind of instrument?
Not at all. Not at all. Nothing happens to you when you play the saxophone.
But you need to exercise them, don't you?
Yes. For you to, for example, when you want to play a very long tone, you need to do some exercises. So I don't think that will not affect your lungs. Not at all.
Okay, so what are the... I'm not going to ask you we're not going to ask you the regular questions. You know, what are the hazards of your job, of your calling, so to speak?
Anyway, a lot of people take us for granted a lot. Apart from the fact that I'm playing saxophone, I study music as a course in the university. And thank God that things are changing now. This has actually changed. When we started, I remember when I was in school, Obafemi Awolowo University, in my room one day, in my room I have a lot of engineers, mechanical engineering, electrical, electronics engineers, medicine student. I was the only art student. Upon that, music. One day, one of them now said, and your parents
are paying for you to come and study.
And your parents allow you to come and... I wasn't feeling bad, but I know he doesn't know what he was saying. Do you know the funniest thing? Few years later, when we left school, I saw this guy on the street of this popular street on CMS Road looking for a job. And I was in my Lincoln Navigator driving. I just stopped. I called him. Hey, guy, what's up? How are you? Sheku, how are you now? What's up now? Wow, I like what you're doing. I've seen you with this. Please connect me now. Now, I didn't tell him what he did, what he said to me then, but I just thought of what he said then. If I was discouraged, I wouldn't have been where I was then, which I am still enjoying the grace of God with the saxophone. So a lot of things, that is the area of my school. Talking about when we go out to minister, you know, a lot of people look down on us as a musician, but then it has changed now. Now, if you're inviting me to come and play in your events, I will collect your money. I will enjoy myself while playing. You will pay me, you will do me. So
he will pay you for enjoying yourself.
Yes, we've been enjoying that so well. Compared to when we started, they will just, this one is playing. Okay, sit down there. I could remember the first time I went to America to go and minister in a spiritual circle. The man now said, okay, saxophone, okay. He was supposed to come and pick me at the airport. He now said, just take a taxi, be coming. Okay, I took the taxi, I went to the church, and I sat down. He now said, so TJ, have you eaten? I said, no, do you want to know? I'm okay now. I said, okay, don't worry, I will get you a place to stay. He doesn't know me. So that very evening, they were doing evening service. He now said, can you minister for 5 minutes? And I started playing. He saw the move of God. He said, please, can we check you into an hotel? I said, no, I'm okay. Fortunately for me, the person that I'm going to stay with, we've been talking, and I now like the spirit of that. No, let me stay with this man. Immediately I started playing, he saw the move of God in my life, he saw the spirit of God in me, and he changed everything about me. Everything he was doing before, he changed. He said, please, I need to check you into an hotel. I said, no, I'm okay. Let me just stay with you. So we've experienced a lot of things, but now things have changed. People appreciate us more than when we started.
Okay, he wanted to.
No, I was just going to, just a little comment that it's the same for many professions now.
Yeah.
I mean, if you told your parent that you wanted to be a dancer, for instance, they would look at you like, my pikin done this sniff.
A dancer is good.
I should pay for you to go and learn how to dance.
A dancer is good. Just say you want to go and do theater.
But those are the things that are paying now. In fact, nowadays, you beg to apply is not paying anybody.
Do you know the funniest thing? My son just finished his secondary school. And I said, Daddy, I want to study music. And he made all this O-level, including JAMB. He has one of the best JAMB results in his school. Now I was asking myself, music. My father-in-law said, Shegun, I hope you are not the one that is influencing this boy to go and study music. And I called him, why do you want to study music? He said, Dad, I love it. I will be fulfilled in studying music. And my own is just that I want to do music business. You know, music business is making, you make a lot of money in music. Yeah. Look at Don Jazzy. When last did you see him release any singles? No. But he's making money with.
He's a godfather.
Yes. So music is serious business that will make a lot of money. Immediately he said that.
Now,
go ahead.
Perhaps also that speaks to the conversation we should be having around music business. A good number of people, I mean, you have crossed the Rubicon, you've been through the rut. There's a number of people. We hosted Alex O 2 weeks ago, and he was talking about the challenges of being in the business of music. He only did the show. Some other persons did the business, and he didn't make as much, from that. For anyone trying to get into the business, what would you recommend as the inroad? They have the skills. Yeah, I know some people can't even sing to save their lives, but they want to be artists.
Of course, I want to be a musician.
Yeah, I want to be, so they love the glitz and glamour and everything. But they don't, what's the inroad that you would recommend to anyone?
Learn about it very well. Read about it very well. We don't even have to go to any school. There are a lot of things on the internet you can read about music business that will help you package yourself very well. That is it. If you can just read books, learn very well, study people that have been doing it before. Maybe you can make Don Jazzy your mentor, all the music gurus outside there. You can be their friends, go to them, learn from them. Music is a way good business now.
Well, perhaps to
I like the way he's saying it.
He knows where he's been through. Perhaps to also, make it clear. I glossed over this the other time. What's the difference between music, being in music, and being in music business?
Okay, for example, now I'm not into music business. I can boldly say I'm a music minister. I do more of performing music in church. But when you are doing a music business, you will know the type of music to release, where to go, where your artists need to go, where not to go.
The laws behind it.
Yes. So that is different.
Copyright and all those things.
Yeah, that is it. So, for example, now, you don't need to sing a song that somebody has sung before. That could land you in a serious mess that can actually destroy what you've been building before.
Some can do covers, right?
You can do cover, provided you get the necessary permission from it.
Okay. Now, one of the ways in which people get into this business is they attend competitions like AGT, America's Got Talent, Nigerian Idol, and all those other things. How fruitful would you say those are in getting to that? Because not everyone that goes into those competitions get close to number 10. And I don't mean 10 Downing Street.
Well, in fact, you are in the spirit now, because I discovered that we most of our upcoming musicians rather, that are not well known, we are taking them for granted a lot. And like what we just said now, me and my team, we're about starting something we call Gospel Icons Africa. It's a reality show. And we are doing it in a way it ought to be done. We have seen a lot of such programs in the time past before, but this time around, we're doing it in a way it ought to be done. For example, by the time we audition you, you get to the next best 10, and you eventually become the winner. 10 million is available for you. A brand new car a brand new SUV is available for you. 2 years recording deal is available for you.
No. It's like you're already advertised now. You're ready to pay. But the reason I'm asking that question is along the line of how functional are music competitions for getting people to start. We know a few in the country, in Nigeria, who got famous through such opportunities.
There are plenty.
Nigerian Idol.
There are plenty. Mercy Chinwo came from Nigerian Idols.
Who?
Mercy Chinwo. Is it Nigeria Idol or Project Film? Is it either Nigeria Idol or Project Film?
I think it's
Dare, as he calls himself now, he was Project Fame.
Yes, Project Fame, and eventually be one of the judges in Project Fame. Well, what you just said now,
The Voice.
Yeah, it's possible when you get to any competition. That can easily elevate your journey in the music industry. For example, Jennifer Hudson, that we all know all over in America now, was part of a particular season in American Idols, and she didn't even get up to, I think, top 6. She's popular more than the person that won that very year. So when you attend competition like that, there is possibility that can easily make your journey to be more faster than what you are thinking before.
Okay, so how does it help you? Okay, some people, you are giving your own example, for instance, of a show you want to do and all those things. A good number of people just want to perform and be seen. They are not interested in the winnings, so to speak. They just want to express themselves. Is there a chance that anyone, I know you just gave the example of Jennifer Hudson, but is there a chance that anyone who is just at the in the background has enough motivation or even challenge to say, I'm going to chase after this and I'm going to make something out of it?
Everything has actually been so easy these days. Social media. If you know how to use it very well, social media can actually take you to any level you want, provided you have the talent.
Which you didn't have when you were starting out.
Yes, there was no social media during our own. I remember the first time I used phone. What is happening now, the people playing music now, they are seriously enjoying. Because social media can actually lift you to any level you want to get to in life, provided the talent is there. Leave the rest for God. So social media, according to what the question you just asked now, social media is the right thing that can actually take you to the level which you have actually, maybe you are thinking to get to in life in music.
Or maybe even beyond your dreams.
Yes.
I saw there's this video of a guy who, okay, so there's this thing they do now, these guys do now. So they will have what they call, I don't know what they call it, but you will sing a verse and you let the audience also take a particular verse. There's this guy who did with, what's that guy's name who did How Are You, My Friend? Drill, your guy. Johnny Drill. So he did that video, and then the guy was like, oh my God. When Johnny Drill himself was like, What did I do to this guy?
Is this my son?
he was literally going after him. But you know, I mean, it's a good thing. At least now we know the things that social media can do. But you are not in the social media right now. You are here live with us. Can you play something? You know, my director would want to hear you. Let's know that this is not just a necklace. Just like that.
No, he will close the program when we sign off.
Pause. Well, you're still going to close us out. Well, Alera will want you to close us out. And that's the show today.
It's been nice being back with you all. I look forward to being with you again next Saturday. My name is Alera Edu.
And I'm Ayo Makinde. Have a wonderful rest of your weekend, and we'll leave you back with Segun Oluwayomi.